liberals to take over our schools and take over our boards. Without further ado, no one's here to hear me speak. We have 820 people here to speak and listen to Vivek Ramaswamy. Please stand.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you guys. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love your energy, man. You're amazing.
Here you go.
Keep up that. I'm excited to see what's next.
Thank you.
That's good. Keep it up. Thank you. Another round of applause for Mario here. Congratulations. Thank you. It's good to be in Indiana. I would say back in Indiana, actually, in Hamilton County. I grew up in, let's see, you able to hear me? It's good. We'll use this one. I grew up in Hamilton County in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now we're in Hamilton County, Indiana. So funny story is my dad, he came halfway around the world to work at the GE plant in Evendale, Ohio, right in Hamilton County. And I asked him, why'd you come halfway around the world right here to Cincinnati? And he said it was because his older sister lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and that was the closest place where he could find a job. Well, that, of course, begged the question of why she came halfway around the world to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the family joke is it is the only U.S. state with the word India contained in the name of the state. So that's a story of how I ended up in the American Midwest. And they came to this country with no money. In a single generation, I have gone on to found multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. Did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, who is a throat surgeon at Ohio State today, raising our 2 sons, following our faith in God. That is the American dream. And thank you. I'm worried that American dream isn't going to exist for our 2 kids and their generation unless we all step up and actually do something about it. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'd love to kick this off by telling you that it is morning in America right now. But I don't believe in peddling fake optimism. It is not morning in America. It can be. But that's not where we are right now. In fact, I think we are at risk. I'm going to say something that's very unpopular right now. It's my job during the presidential campaign. My view of this is if you care about somebody, you tell them the truth. If you care about somebody, you tell them the truth. If you care about yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I believe is the truth right now is we are at risk of repeating the same mistake we made in 2022 for that red wave that never came. That's where I believe we are right now. Why didn't we have that red wave? We were promised that in 2022. They blamed Trump, they blamed abortion, they blamed a lot of things. I think it's deeper than that. It's that we as conservatives, I believe, we have actually grown lazy. I don't mean lazy in get-out-the-vote operations. I don't mean lazy in early voting. We may mean those things too, but that's not the sense I mean it in. I mean we have grown lazy in defining who we are and what we actually stand for. We've grown addicted to just criticizing the other side and what they put on offer. And they give us a long list. The radical Biden agenda gives us a long list of things to criticize. But I think the fact of the matter is, if you're going to get fast forward a few months from now, I think there's a very good chance that Joe Biden is not even the nominee. I think there's a very good chance that Biden is not even the president who's running the country right now. He is a puppet for the managerial class underneath him. And we got to see what's actually going on in the country if we're to wake up and fix it. And so my call to action tonight is for us to move from just being a party that is running from something. We got to be a movement that is running back to something, back to our vision of what it means to be an American in the year 2024. What does it mean to be a Republican? What does it mean to be a conservative? What does it mean to be an American in the year 2024? To me, it means we believe in the ideals of 1776. And we live in a 1776 moment right now. It took 7 years and then some for the Founding Fathers to win the American Revolution. Well, you know what? I think if we don't get this right in the next 7 years, I don't think we're going to have a country left. If my two sons are in high school before we get this right, I think that's the ball game. That's the time horizon we're working with. That's what gives me my sense of urgency. What does it mean to be an American? To me, it means we believe in the ideals that our founding fathers enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution 250 years ago. Ideals like merit and the pursuit of excellence, that you do get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That is why we're against affirmative action and the DEI agenda and racial group quota systems in every area of American life. It has been a cancer on our national soul, and we are done with it. It means we believe in the rule of law. And I say this as the kid of legal immigrants who came to this country through the front door, the right way. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law, and that is why we are in the right to use our own military to secure our own southern border and our northern border, too. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law in the United States of America. It means we believe in free speech and open debate. It means we believe the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government, not the shadow government and the deep state that's pulling the strings today. You want to get serious about actually draining the swamp, we got to be prepared to fire 75% of those federal bureaucrats occupying government buildings in Washington, D.C. You cannot tame that beast. You have to get in there and be willing to shut it down. You know, we talk about mass deportations in this country, and I'm in favor of them. If we've had the largest influx of illegal migrants into this country in American history, then it stands to reason that we should have the largest mass deportation in American history. So that's the first mass deportation that's coming. But don't forget the second one. We got a second mass deportation, too, of about 3 million federal bureaucrats out of Washington, D.C. And that, too, is how you get this country back. But the thing is, these aren't black ideas or white ideas, actually. These aren't even really Democrat ideas or Republican ideas. They shouldn't be. They're American ideals that we fought a revolution 250 years ago. And the question for us now is, do we believe those ideals still exist? I do. I believe we just have to revive them. That's what this election is about. We are in the middle of a war in this country right now. And I don't use that word lightly. It is not a war between black and white, between man and woman, between gay and straight, or even between Democrat and Republican. It's deeper than that. It is a war between those of us who love the United States of America and our founding ideals, and a fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for. It is a war between those of us who believe in merit and those who believe in group quotas, between those who believe in free speech and those who believe in censorship, between those who believe in American exceptionalism and those who believe in apologizing for our founding ideals. There is no middle ground here. Now, the good news I can share with you, after running the campaign for president, I traveled most of the states in this union, been in rooms just like this one, from the south side of Chicago to Kensington and Philadelphia to here in Indiana to Iowa, from sea to shining sea. I can tell you this. 80% of us in this country are on the pro-American side of this war. And I'll give you even better news than that. Half the 20% on the other side, you see it on the campuses today, are people younger than me who never learned those ideals in the first place. We can bring them along too. But if you want to get serious about actually winning this war, we got to view it as one. It's going to take a commander-in-chief who's going to lead us to victory in that war. I'm here to do my part to make sure that man is Donald J. Trump, the 47th President of the United States of America. We need a commander-in-chief to lead us to victory this time around. But we need a battle plan. We need a clear vision of what we stand for. And if we truly view this as a war to win, I'll tell you tonight, I think there are 3 frontiers that really matter. The first is the real generals on the other side are the members of that deep state, that managerial class, that federal bureaucracy, the people who we never elected to run the government, that are actually responsible for running the government today. Take government agencies like the U.S. Department of Education, the ATF, the CDC, the FTC, the SEC, the FDA, the God knows what of the alphabet soup. That's actually writing the regulations that never went through Congress. We can no longer incrementally just reform these agencies. Reform does not work. We got to be willing to get in there and actually take the Department of Education and shut it down. Give that money back to parents across this country to choose where they send their kids to school. That's the first frontier of this war. The second frontier is you go after the reinforcements on the other side. You got the generals there in the deep state. The reinforcements are the 10+ million illegal migrants that have entered this country and growing over the course of just 3 years of the Biden administration. This is a solvable problem. The country put a man on the moon, knows how to fix this problem. You put the military on the southern border, stop using our own federal taxpayer dollars to pay for the violation of the rule of law, end federal funding for sanctuary cities, end federal funding to any Central American country until they have actually stopped that northward flow of migrants from Venezuela to the southern border of Texas, end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals in this country, and send back anybody who's in this country illegally to their country of origin. That solves that problem. But do we have the spine to actually do it? But what I want to spend the most time on tonight is the third frontier of this war, which is the infantrymen on the other side. And I want to tell you a story about what we see happening on the college campuses today to really understand what's going on there. The other day they had a video of student protesters chanting what they thought was the word intifada. This is the Arab word for uprising, many associate it with a call to end Israel. But if you listen really carefully to the tape, what are these people actually saying? They're chanting intifada, which isn't even a word, actually. And it's interesting when you actually pause to note that. You have people protesting at campuses across the country, not even knowing why they're on that stage, staging that protest. And I think that's the deeper issue we have yet failed as a movement to address. It's not that the millions of Gen Z and millennial Americans across this country are against what we stand for. It's that we're lost, actually. We're hungry for purpose and meaning and identity at a time in our history when the things that used to fill that void, faith in God, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. And when you have a vacuum in your heart that runs that deep, that is when the poison fills the void. It almost doesn't matter what the poison is, actually. We obsess over it too much at times. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, anti-Semitism. These are symptoms of a deeper void. And I think it's up to us now to level up and fill that void with the real thing. We are hungry to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet we can no longer even answer what it means to be an American. When you have a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, the old expression goes, something else will instead. Well, if you don't pledge allegiance to that flag, the United States of America, you will quite literally pledge allegiance to a different flag instead. That's where the transgender flag comes from. More transgender flags in Washington, D.C. in the month of June than there are American flags if you walk the streets of our nation's capital. That's what's going on in our country. We cannot anymore just play this game of whack-a-mole. Got some wokeism over here, got that down. 2 years later, some transgenderism pops up. COVIDism took care of that. Why is climatism now on the rebound? These are substitutes for the real thing. And I think the left is very good at this. They will give young people a vision. It's not the right vision, but they'll give them something to work with. Race, gender, sexuality, climate. We're sitting here criticizing that vision, but we got to offer an alternative vision of our own, of what we actually stand for. We stand for the individual. That you're not some member of group identity riding the tectonic plates of race and gender. You are you, an individual, an agent free to achieve anything you want with your own hard work and dedication. We believe in the family, that the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind, and that we're not going to apologize for it. We believe in the nation, that I'm a citizen of this nation, the United States of America, not some nebulous global citizen fighting climate change, and that we are one nation under God. Individual, family, nation, and God beat race, gender, sexuality, and climate if we have the courage to actually stand for something. So that's my ask of each of you. We're not going to win this election. We're not going to have the red wave of 2024. It's going to look a lot like the red wave of 2022, the one that never came, if we just satisfy ourselves criticizing the other side. But we will win this election and then some in a landslide, like what Ronald Reagan delivered in 1980 and in 1984. That is what I believe we have the potential to do this year if we have the courage to actually stand for our own alternative vision. That's what's our work cut out for us as a movement. And the question of whether or not we rise to the occasion, that's the answer of whether this country actually continues for our children or not. We live in a 1776 moment, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's going to require some sacrifice of each of us. Our founding fathers were 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. I want to tell you a little bit about what actually happened to them. We talk about our founding fathers. We don't talk about the risks they took and what actually ended up happening. Of those 56 men, 5 of them were captured by the British and tortured until their deaths. 12 of them had their homes ransacked and burned to the ground. 9 of them died in the Revolutionary War. 2 more of them had their own children die in the Revolutionary War. Many of them died bankrupt because they had their property seized. They're like the people in this room, actually. They weren't people who necessarily had nothing to lose. They had a lot to lose. They were landowners. They were farmers. They were proprietors, lawyers, successful people, just like those who we have here tonight. Those are the character of our founding fathers, but they took the risk anyway. They didn't do it for them. They did it for us, so we could be here 250 years later in a country greater than the one they bequeathed to us. So for our founding fathers, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, are meeting us in the afterlife and ask us, what sacrifice did you make for your country? We better have a darn good answer to give them. And I think that's the requirement if we're going to have a country left at the end of it, is a sacrifice, taking real risk. Many of you here, you're supporting the Republican Party. Thank you. Money is not the only way you can support our movement. We have a culture of fear that has spread across this country like an epidemic. Fear of losing your job. Fear of your kids getting a bad grade in school. Fear of becoming an outcast in your own community. You want to take some risk? You want to make a sacrifice for this country? I'll tell you how. When you are the only person in a room who believes what you do, you have an obligation now more than ever to actually stand up and say it. Say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect means that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think, not some woke-washed version of it. That is how we get this country back. Fear has been infectious, but courage can be contagious too. It just requires more of us to actually show it. And I think I speak for all of us when I say the inheritance we want to give our kids, it isn't just a bunch of green pieces of paper. It is a country greater than the one that we grew up in. That's what this nation has always been built on. We don't teach our kids the history of this country anymore, but one of the things I decided to do after the presidential campaign was, rather than talk about the importance of teaching history to our kids, maybe we should just take some time and talk about our history once in a while, actually. Now, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that Declaration of Independence, he was 33 years old when he did it, younger than me. He was also a guy who invented the swivel chair while he was at it. Think about that. The modern swivel chair that we sit in was invented by Thomas Jefferson while writing the Declaration of Independence. He invented the polygraph test. That's a version of the lie detector test. Benjamin Franklin, the guy who signed it, invented multiple musical instruments used by Beethoven and Mozart, invented a remedy to the common cold. He actually invented the lightning rod as well as the Franklin stove, one of the leading inventions of thermodynamics in their time. Robert Livingston, who was our ambassador to France while serving as ambassador to France, also invented, along with Robert Fulton, the steamship, the backbone of the Industrial Revolution. You think about it, these are our founding fathers. They weren't professional politicians, they weren't people who stayed in their lanes. They were the pioneers, the unafraid, the explorers, the people who would not be stopped by any government or system standing in their way. There was something in the water back then. See, today we teach our kids about our founding. They were slaveholders. Our nation was founded in 1619 rather than 1776. When what we ought to be remembering of our nation's history is that this country was always built on the back of people who could achieve anything with their own ingenuity and hard work and dedication. That's what we got to pass on to our kids. Think about our founding fathers. One of the things we don't teach them is a story I'll share with all of you tonight in closing. I'll encourage you to maybe pass it on to your kids because they might not have learned it in school anymore. It was the story of one of our founding fathers who actually wasn't a slaveholder. John Adams. He was an abolitionist on principle. And his son, John Quincy Adams, was our first non-founding father to actually serve as U.S. president. But there was always a great disappointment in his tenure as president. He was a good Secretary of State. He never quite achieved his potential as a president. He was disappointed about that. It bothered him. He ended up getting voted out after a term. But it bothered him he hadn't fully made his sacrifice for this country. He went on to become the only U.S. president to go back and then serve in Congress after having served as the U.S. president. Think about that, the humility that requires of somebody. Imagine that happening today. Well, today, they sign Netflix deals or whatever it is that some of these guys are doing. He goes back to Congress with the sole goal of achieving abolition. Now, when he returned to Congress, it turns out there was a rule in Congress. You hear about the gag order applied to President Trump in the trials today. Well, they had a gag order in Congress back then. You could not say the word slavery on the Congress floor. The southern states had said, we don't want to debate the issue. You can't say the word slavery. Well, this guy has already been president of the United States. He's got nothing to lose. He gets on the Congress floor and he says, slavery, 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 slavery. And uses that to get himself censured, and then uses his own trial as a way to make the case for abolition, achieving what his father never did, what he never could do as U.S. president, now making the sacrifice in Congress to actually have a debate that Congress wasn't having. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., it went about 2 weeks. By the end of his own trial to remain in Congress, the gag rule had been abolished, paving the way for the rest of what followed. He ended up dying on the Congress floor. He had a stroke in the middle of a speech. He died in that very chamber where he served. They kept him alive for 2 more days in the congressional anteroom upstairs until he finally passed, and they had to take volunteers from the other lower ranks of Congress of who was going to do his funeral rites and carrying him out. And the person who raised his hand and said he would do it was none other than a little-known first-term congressman from the state of Illinois by the name of Abraham Lincoln. You see, these are the stories of American history we don't teach our kids in the classroom anymore. You can't be proud of a country unless you actually know something about that country, unless you actually have skin in the game. That's why I said it in the campaign. It got me in trouble, but I'll say it again tonight. I think every high school senior in this country should have to pass the same civics test to graduate from high school as every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of this country. It's not too much to ask. So that's the word I'll leave with every one of you tonight. Each of us has our own unique God-given gifts. The question is, how are we going to use those gifts to do what is right in the short time that we are given? And so I'm going to ask you to go home and look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself what sacrifice you are willing to make for this country, because this may be the last year that you actually get to ask yourself that question. Our nation is skating on thin ice. We're not working with a lot of time here. But if we each step up and do our parts, those of you who have lived the American dream, to support this movement and this party and the good candidates who are going to get this country back, thank you for doing it. Make the sacrifice not just by writing some small check, but such that you actually feel it. For those of you who may not have the ability to do that, there are many ways to save this country as a volunteer, as somebody who speaks in a corporate boardroom, to a nonprofit boardroom, to a parent-teacher conference. Speak in your mind, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard, when it involves some risk. I'm asking every one of you to go home and ask yourself what sacrifice you are willing to make for this country as our founding fathers did 250 years ago. And if you all do your part, I promise you, as our next president, Donald Trump, will do his, leaders across this country, your elected officials in this country and in this room will do theirs, to make sure that we're not this nation in decline, to make sure that we don't have to be at the end of the ancient Roman Empire, but to make sure that we as a country can still be a nation in our ascent, a nation whose best days, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, a nation whose best days are actually still ahead of us. A country where we will still look our kids in the eye and mean it when we tell them that you do get ahead in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, and your own dedication. And that, you know what, you are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. And with your help, that is what we will revive to save this great nation. Thank you for coming tonight, guys. God bless you and your families, and may God bless our United States of America. Do not stop fighting until we get this job done. This nation is worth saving, and save it we will. Thank you all. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great job.